On the day Evelyn returned to the country, the usually low-key Charles made a grand show of going to the airport to pick her up. The relationship between me, an 18-line small actor, and the young prince of the southern city's business world has once again become a hot topic on social media. When I saw this trending topic, it was already the early hours of the next day. At the corner of the street, in a 24-hour convenience store, the scene of Charles picking someone up at the airport last night is playing. A crowd of reporters surrounded them, and he carefully held Evelyn in his arms as they made their way to the business car. I bought a pack of cigarettes, sat on the ground, and struck the lighter with force. Yesterday, June 6th, was the third anniversary of Charles and me. Charles promised to spend our anniversary with me, but instead left me on the yacht to endure the cold wind all night long. When he called me, he said, "Amelia, I have something at the company tonight, so I won't be back for dinner." He completely forgot our anniversary. I chuckled to myself, opened a bottle of red wine, and toasted to him. It was just a plaything for Charles for 3 years. How could it compare to his first love, whom he had adored since childhood? I sat at the street corner, my head pounding fiercely. Supporting my head, I pulled out my phone and quickly scrolled through various mocking comments and harsh reviews trending online. Charles's first love has returned, Amelia, this inferior substitute, should be offline now. Just a plaything of the prince, deservedly so. A thing that doesn't deserve to be on stage really thinks it can compare to the little princess of the Wynn family. A hand suddenly snuffed out the cigarette in my hand. "Girl, smoking is not good for you." I looked up and saw it was Miles. Suddenly, I remembered this was the street corner next to the hospital. Miles was the chief surgeon when I was hospitalized with a fracture during my last film shoot. I heard from the little nurses in the hospital that Miles is a surgical genius who returned home after studying abroad. Don't look anymore. Miles blocked my phone, pulled me up, "I'll take you back." When Miles was taking me back to the villa, we happened to see Charles's assistant waiting outside the villa. I was a bit surprised. Usually at this time, Charles would have already gone to the office. I stood outside the gate, and Miles must have sensed my hesitation. He said, "Miss Amelia, I'll take you this far." With that, he returned the coat he had carried for me all the way. "Miles, thank you today." I had just taken the coat and was about to leave when I was called back by Miles. He picked up a medicine bottle from the ground and handed it to me. It was the one I had accidentally dropped from my pocket just now. I hurriedly took the item and stuffed it into my pocket, just about to thank him again, when a cold voice from inside the room interrupted, "Where have you been all night?" Saying this, Charles took a few steps forward and pulled me into the door. I glanced back at Miles with a hint of apology, my eyes signaling him to be at ease. Charles pinned me against the door, one hand forcefully turning my face to make me look at him. "Amelia, you've grown wings. Is that why you didn't come home all night, because you were with that man?" My eyes suddenly turned red, and I closed them, turning my head away, trying hard to hide the grievance in my voice. "Miles just happened to bring me back, unlike you and Miss Evelyn's tender affection. Stop messing around." Charles paused, released my hand, and just as Evelyn returned to the country, Uncle Wynn asked me to. "Charles, come have breakfast." Evelyn's voice came from the kitchen. I didn't expect to meet Evelyn so soon. Following the sound, she was placing 2 plates of breakfast on the dining table, gently waving at Charles. She was still wearing the apron I had just bought. In the end, Evelyn seemed to have just noticed me and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Miss Amelia, I didn't know you would come. I only made 2 breakfasts." "No need, I've eaten." I shot her a cold glance and turned to head upstairs to my room. As they went upstairs, they still heard Charles casually saying, "Don't mind her." I lay in bed, listening to Charles downstairs lavishly praising Evelyn's skills, feeling incredibly annoyed and wondering why this damn villa had no soundproofing. In these 3 years, I have cooked countless meals for Charles, yet he has rarely praised me, often just waiting for the dishes to be reheated again and again. Charles is very busy with work and often has an irregular diet and schedule. I specifically learned about dietary combinations from a nutritionist for this purpose. When I'm not filming, I personally prepare 3 meals a day for him at home, never entrusting it to others. I care about his health more than anyone else. Looking back now, it seems like a joke. I had a severe headache, turned over to grab a bottle of water, fumbled to take 2 pills, and fell into a heavy sleep. I dreamed again. In the dream, I desperately begged him not to leave me. Scalding tears soaked my pillow, and I wept silently in my dream. I don't know when Charles arrived. When I woke up, he was sitting at the head of my bed, and my hand was still tightly gripping the corner of his clothing. The next second after my consciousness returned, I threw myself into his arms. I know I can't compete with Evelyn, and I've never thought of comparing myself to her. But I can't be without you, can you please not leave me? Charles paused for a moment, his warm hand resting on my back, gently stroking me. He said, "No, it won't." Charles lifted my face, a flicker of something unusual passing through his eyes. He leaned down and kissed my eyes, kissing away the tears from the corners, taking them into his mouth. In the mingling of lips and teeth, I lay in his arms, emotionally calling out to him, "Charles, you cannot deceive me." Moments later, Charles wiped the slightly reddened corners of my eyes and, with a slightly hoarse voice, said, "Tonight is Evelyn's welcome dinner, she specifically invited you. I've prepared a dress for you, so get up." The Wen family in the southern city is a scholarly lineage that has produced several contemporary great scholars. The name Evelyn sounds very cultured at first hearing. Unlike me, a low-level worker from a small town, a test-taker, and a minor actor from beyond the 18th line. If I hadn't gone to great lengths to get into a high-end wine gathering 3 years ago, I would never have encountered Charles at my level. Not to mention that because I resembled Evelyn somewhat, I caught Charles's eye and became his girlfriend for 3 years. I am very aware that the gap between Charles and me is like a chasm. Evelyn's welcome banquet was arranged at the Wen family's private estate, incredibly luxurious. She was the little princess of the Wen family, adored by all, able to have whatever she desired. When Charles and I arrived at the manor, Evelyn had already been informed in advance. She personally went to the door to greet Charles, today wearing a dress that was almost the same color as mine, standing at the forefront of the crowd, radiant and dazzling. As soon as Charles got out of the car, she affectionately leaned in and casually linked her arm with his. "Charles, you finally made it. I almost thought you weren't coming." With that, she pouted a little playfully. Charles chuckled lightly, giving Evelyn's nose a playful poke, his words filled with affection. How could I possibly miss our little princess's welcome party? I was momentarily stunned. The usually aloof and cold Charles from the South City could actually smile so beautifully. I really like seeing Charles smile, but he always has no smile for me. It feels as if my heart has been pierced with a heavy pain. In the crowd, it was unclear who started the commotion. "Evelyn, you finally came back. Charles has been waiting for you for many years." I hurried a couple of steps, standing behind Charles, watching that figure and calling out to him, "Charles." Due to my voice, the originally harmonious atmosphere froze for a moment. The next second, everyone suddenly burst into laughter. After all, coming from a small rural place, they can't even pronounce Charles's name correctly, yet they try to act all sentimental. Laughing so hard that I lost my teeth, not even able to tell Jean from Jing. I really don't understand how Charles could be interested in this kind of person. I was squeezed in the crowd, silently smiling. Over these 3 years, I have lost count of how many times I have been mocked. Charles turned around, frowning slightly in displeasure. Perhaps he felt embarrassed as well. "Amelia, I'm going to visit the elders, you find a place to wait." I found a corner to sit in, feeling utterly bored, just wanting to get through tonight's banquet as quickly as possible. "Sister Evelyn, your dress today is really beautiful, it must be a special custom from Chanel. You have such sharp eyes." It was Charles who made the arrangements for me in advance, specially preparing a welcome for me. Somehow, the conversation circled back to me. "Look over there, that person is wearing a dress, just like Sister Evelyn's. Just now I praised your keen eyesight, so why can't you see clearly now?" "That's not the same at all, it's clearly a case of Dongsher imitating Xia." Feeling the gaze of their attention, I turned my head and saw them coming towards me in small groups. I remember now, the dress on Evelyn was the one Charles took me to order a year ago. It turns out, it wasn't meant for me. Hey, you ugly monster, today is Sister Evelyn's welcome party. How dare you wear the same dress? Are you trying to steal Sister Evelyn's thunder? Someone spontaneously brought up Evelyn. I looked down at the dress I was wearing, and it did resemble Evelyn's dress somewhat, as if it were a lower-tier version of a haute couture piece. Amelia, it's indeed inappropriate for you to wear this. Why don't you offer a toast to Evelyn as an apology? Evelyn is kind and generous, and she surely won't hold it against you. Someone stepped in as a peacemaker. A glass of red wine was handed to me, and I glanced at the person, not recognizing them. The crowd around us began to stir, urging me to apologize to Evelyn. I took the wine glass, suppressing the urge to splash it in her face. Evelyn walked up with a smile, leaned close to me and softly said, Amelia, what's fake is fake, no matter how you act, it can never become real. Tell me, will Charles believe you or believe me? The next moment, Evelyn suddenly grabbed my hand and splashed red wine all over her gown. Amelia, what are you doing? Behind me, Charles suddenly appeared, pulling me aside and shielding Evelyn in front of him. Charles, Amelia said my dress is ugly and even got it dirty. Evelyn clung to Charles's hand like a wounded rabbit, fragile and aggrieved. Amelia, how did I never realize before that you are so unreasonable? Charles didn't even let me explain a word and indiscriminately accused me. Evelyn kindly invited you to the welcome dinner. What kind of scene are you trying to create? My anger flared up instantly, clearly, such a clumsy trick, and Charles didn't even want to think twice before concluding that I was bullying Evelyn. Am I being unreasonable? Charles, you didn't even ask a single question before concluding that I bullied her. Do you trust me even a little? Huh. I scoffed, realizing that in your eyes, I was always just a trivial amusement, nowhere near the value of your precious first love. I pushed the person in front of me aside and turned to run out of the banquet hall. Tears, however, fell uncontrollably. I returned to the villa alone. In a daze, I heard Charles come back, reeking of alcohol, with a faint scent of cigar lingering on him. He leaned down to kiss me, fiercely biting my lips with an undeniable dominance. Charles's hand, carrying the cool chill of the late night, invaded my body, instantly awakening my consciousness. I struggled, desperately trying to push him away, but it only stirred his possessiveness even more. The tall figure completely enveloped me, pressing me down beneath him, kissing me with a more violent and fervent intensity. Charles, let go of me. I bit down hard on his lip until I tasted the strong metallic flavor of blood, and only then did he reluctantly release me. What more do you want? Stop making a fuss. Evelyn didn't blame you for getting her clothes dirty, so what are you still doing? Charles, I didn't stain her clothes, she spilled the red wine herself. Charles suddenly grabbed my chin and said unhappily, I saw it with my own eyes. Amelia, you still want to argue? I suddenly felt extremely nauseous, pushed Charles away, and rushed to the sink to gag uncomfortably. Amelia, I have spoiled you too much, making you unable to recognize your own identity. Reflect on yourself well, and go apologize to Evelyn tomorrow. With that, Charles ignored me and turned to leave, sweeping his sleeves as he went. The black Maybach drove out of the villa, kicking up dust as it sped away without a moment's pause. I propped my elbows on the sink and looked up. The bright mirror in the bathroom reflected my pale, bloodless tear-streaked face. Amelia, are you okay? When I opened WeChat, the first message was actually a greeting from Miles. I was puzzled when I saw the trending news constantly being pushed to me. Evelyn had posted an intimate photo of herself and Charles stargazing on the rooftop on social media. A wonderful night. This suggestive post quickly soared to the trending topics, and news about Evelyn and Charles's impending engagement swiftly circulated online. It turns out that Charles had spent the night away seeking out his first love to share a romantic evening. I'm fine, thank you for your concern, Miles. I replied to Miles, and then I opened the message below, which was from my agent Emma, saying she had landed me a guest role in a big drama. Because I was a temporary substitute, the crew needed the artist to join immediately. I quickly packed my things, said a few words to the nanny, and hurriedly left. By the time I joined the group in the evening, the trending topic had been brewing for a whole day, and I still hadn't received a single explanation from Charles. I felt a heavy blockage in my heart, somewhat distracted. During the intermission, I couldn't help but open WeChat and send a message to Charles. I thought for a long time, wanting to question him about the trending topic, wanting to hear his explanation. My finger hovered over the send button, the cursor blinking repeatedly, the text deleted and rewritten again and again. In the end, I pathetically sent a message, Charles, I've joined the cast to shoot the film. I don't want to admit it, I'm afraid I will never see his face again. After a long while, a sound came from over there, a soft Huh. What am I really hoping for? The final guest appearance was a scene where the crown prince was forced to abdicate and was executed, and the prince's consort, heartbroken, took her own life in a show of devotion. Perhaps it was because of Charles's perfunctory reply that I cried especially hard in the play, nearly fainting. The director shouted, "Cut," but my tears kept falling uncontrollably. Later, I don't know what happened, I suddenly lost consciousness. I woke up in the hospital. Emma said I fainted on set. I shook my head vigorously, but I couldn't remember anything. I opened my phone, and in the chat window with Charles, it was still stuck on that, I felt a bit dejected and lowered my eyes. Amelia. My eyes lit up, and I raised my gaze to look outside the door, where I saw Charles striding towards me in a black suit. Emma called me and said you fainted on set. Charles entered the ward, sat down by my bed, and said with a tone of reproach, "Don't act anymore." The smile I had just raised froze on my face. Charles knew very well that I loved acting, but he never approved. He always said that putting myself out there was dirty and exhausting, and that I wasn't the one supporting him. However, what I have always wanted was never to be a plaything nurtured by Charles of the South City. 3 years ago, Evelyn left Charles behind to pursue her studies abroad, focusing on the music she loved. Though he was reluctant, he fully supported her decision. It turns out that love and indifference are so obvious. I pouted in grievance and cried into Charles's arms, "Charles, I feel so uncomfortable and dizzy. Can you stay and keep me company?" Charles gently patted my back, a rare display of tenderness. I thought Charles still cared about me. But the next moment, he answered a call, left with a hurried remark that there was an urgent matter at the company to attend to, and quickly departed. It was clearly Evelyn's voice coming from the phone at the door of the ward. I lay on the hospital bed, silently shedding tears, utterly disappointed. Evelyn was right about one thing, what is fake, no matter how much it resembles the real thing. During a break at the hospital, Miles came to see me, bringing a bouquet of sunflowers. He said, "Sunflowers are warm like the sun and can bring hope to people." Miles comforted me and casually mentioned that the hospital suspected I was pregnant. I had long-term medication that caused hormonal imbalances in my body. Based on my medical history, the hospital ordered hormone tests, and unexpectedly, it turned out I was in the early stages of pregnancy. Amelia, I consulted the relevant doctors, and given your current physical condition, it is really not advisable for you to conceive. When Miles said this, there was a barely noticeable worry in his eyes. When I heard this news, my mind went blank. Charles and I both took precautions when we were together. I knew my own physical condition and dared not to become pregnant. Because, for these years, I had been taking antidepressant medication. Although the condition has been controlled in the past 2 years and medication has been reduced, Miles is right, it is indeed inappropriate. Neither physically nor emotionally. It is not suitable. I never intended to hide anything from Miles. The last time he found the pill bottle outside the villa, I knew I couldn't keep it from him. I was in a state of turmoil. Having thanked Miles, I insisted on being discharged to find Charles. Upon arriving at the Food Group building, I went straight to the floor where Charles was located. I have been to the Fu building countless times, often personally bringing meals to Charles, and the people at the company all know me. But today, their gazes towards me have changed, they occasionally whisper to each other and steal glances at me. When I went upstairs, I realized that it was Evelyn who had come to the company. She stood in the crowd like the moon surrounded by stars, her smile bright and enchanting. I am about to get engaged to Charles, and everyone is invited to come and celebrate. The employees cheered, calling Evelyn young lady in a flattering manner. I stood frozen in place, at a loss. I didn't know who had spotted me first, Amelia? Before long, the onlooking employees dispersed, pretending to return to their workstations and focus on their tasks. But in reality, I know their gossiping hearts are burning with curiosity. I also really want to know if Charles is really going to get engaged. Pushing open the door to Charles's office, I boldly interrupted his conference call for the first time. I pointed at Evelyn and asked him, "Are you really going to get engaged to her? Get out." Charles glared at me coldly, his hand covering the receiver of the phone. "Charles, you quickly tell me if it's true." I couldn't control my emotions any longer and, disregarding everything, rushed over to snatch the phone from his hand and smashed it heavily on the ground. Slap. What answered me was a resounding slap from Charles. "Amelia, you are simply being unreasonable." Charles's strength was immense, and I lost my balance and fell to the ground. Evelyn hurriedly picked up her phone and comforted, "Charles, don't be angry. It's all my fault for not being able to stop Amelia. I should have informed Miss Amelia in advance that Charles is negotiating an important project and cannot be disturbed." "Evelyn, don't speak for her. Amelia, just look at you with that shrewish demeanor, what part of you can compare to Evelyn?" Charles, furious, pointed at me and shouted, "Get out of here." I was stunned and didn't react for a moment. My assistant came in and dragged me out. "Amelia, let me take you back first." When I came to my senses, my assistant had already pulled me out of the office. I hung my head, tears streaming down my face, clutching the test results in my pocket without saying a word. The assistant sighed, took out a tissue, and handed it to me to wipe my tears. "Amelia, don't be too sad. Mr. Charles didn't mean it." "Assistant, you must know, right?" I felt as if I had grasped a lifeline, gripping the assistant's arm and asking him, "Tell me, is Charles going to propose to Evelyn?" "Miss Amelia, you know that the Fu and Wen families have been family friends for generations, so it is quite normal for them to consider a marriage alliance, but Mr. Charles did not mention this matter." The assistant comforted, "I believe Mr. Charles has you in his heart. Don't worry too much, you need to rest well after just being discharged from the hospital. Those who can be special assistants in a group seem to be born with a magical ability to speak. They always know what others most want to hear." As soon as I returned to the villa, I ran into the nanny. She gathered her clothes and went downstairs to wash them, noticing my slight discomfort as she greeted me, "Miss Amelia, you have returned." I nodded and stepped up the stairs. "Wait." I called out to the nanny, snatching the clothes from her hands, "What is this?" "Miss Amelia, this is Mr. Charles's clothing. I certainly know that this is Charles's shirt. But on that pure white shirt, there is a glaring red lipstick mark. Charles, you actually..." I went upstairs in a daze, and on the bedside table was the roly-poly that Charles had given me. At that time, I was being scolded by the director for the poor filming of a play, and Charles came to visit the set, bringing me this roly-poly toy. He said to be like this roly-poly toy, to be someone who is not easily defeated. It was one of the few romantic moments Charles gave me in these 3 years. But now, it all seems utterly ridiculous to me. I angrily swept the roly-poly toy along with the things on the bedside table to the floor, and they fell with a crash, scattering everywhere. But in a moment, there was a bit of regret, searching the ground for that roly-poly toy. I really am being foolish. Why go looking for things I've thrown away? In this way, I would not discover the old iron box hidden in the drawer under Charles's bed. One would never see, on that yellowed photograph, the young Charles embracing Evelyn, smiling with gentle eyes. In the photo, Evelyn is wearing a white long dress, with long black hair, and a silver butterfly hairpin tucked behind her ear. In my hand, I hold a roly-poly that is exactly the same as the one in my hand. On the back, it says, "Evelyn should be like a roly-poly and be a person who never fails." I slumped to the ground, feeling the sting of the slap on my face start to burn. I pulled out the crumpled lab report from my pocket, tearing it into shreds, piece by piece. It seems to be tearing apart the dreams from the past 3 years that I should not have been so attached to. The dream will eventually wake. I think, perhaps it is time to leave. I should no longer allow myself to fall deeper into illness. I went to the hospital, preparing to secretly terminate the pregnancy. After the complete examination report came out, the doctor told me that they did not recommend ending the pregnancy. "Miss Amelia, your ultrasound imaging shows the presence of endometriosis and uterine fibroids. The position of this fibroid will obstruct the doctor's view, and if we proceed with the surgery, we may not be able to accurately assess the condition within the uterine cavity. Moreover, given your physical condition, terminating the pregnancy could increase the risk of significant bleeding during the surgery." The doctor saw my troubled expression and comforted me, saying, "Fortunately, the fibroid is not large at the moment, and its location generally won't affect the development of the fetus. We suggest you consider pregnancy and have regular checkups to monitor the development of the fetus." "Where is your husband? Didn't your husband come with you?" I hurriedly covered up in a panic. "My husband is quite busy with work, and I haven't told him yet." "Thank you, doctor, I will think it over carefully." I almost fled in a panic, with the examination report in hand. Stumbling out of the hospital, the sunlight fell on me, creating an indescribable sense of disconnection. Behind me is a shadow of darkness, while ahead may lie a bright and open path. Yet I cannot let go of that shadow, and I cannot bring myself to take a step forward. I held on to the shadow tightly, afraid that it would vanish from beneath my feet in the next moment. I started to have a headache again. The more I think, the more my head hurts. "Get me a pack of cigarettes," I said to the convenience store clerk, pointing at the cigarettes on the glass shelf. "We don't need it, thank you." Just as I was about to reach out to take the cigarette from the salesman's hand, Miles appeared again. He politely nodded to the clerk in apology and pulled me out of the convenience store. "Amelia, did you forget the doctor's advice?" Miles looked at me and reached out, handing over a stack of papers. It was the test results I didn't even realize I had dropped. I reached out to take the order, but Miles pulled back and took it back. "Miles?" I voiced my confusion. "Amelia, if the child needs a father, I can." "No." I interrupted Miles sharply, before he could say anything else. "Miles, you can't." "Ha, Amelia has such a cruel heart, not even giving me the chance to speak." Miles chuckled lightly, feeling a bit at a loss as he looked around. The gaze of someone in love cannot be hidden. I have long seen through Miles's feelings for me. It is precisely because I know that I must refuse. It is unfair to Miles this way. I can't clear the fog in my heart, nor can I escape those stories that blur the line between truth and illusion. How can I pretend to be someone else again? Miles, you should return the list to me now. Amelia, your pretense of being strong really makes my heart ache. In fact, you don't have to be so strong around me, Amelia. You have been discharged from my care, you are no longer my patient." Miles suddenly hugged me tightly and joked, "If I give you a hug, it doesn't count as a doctor-patient dispute, right? If you want, I allow you to cry in my arms for a little while. But you can't cry for too long, I'm afraid I won't be able to let go." I immediately burst into tears. That day, Miles talked to me a lot and gave me many suggestions. In the end, I was determined to leave the child behind, to let the father raise the son. When I hid the examination form and returned, Charles had already returned to the villa. "Where have you been?" On the living room sofa, Charles remained as proud as ever. "It's nothing, just taking a walk because I'm in a bad mood." I couldn't be bothered to deal with him, so I gave a perfunctory reply and was about to turn and head upstairs. Charles suddenly turned cold, smashing the wine glass in his hand onto the ground. The crimson wine splashed everywhere, and I was startled by his sudden action, taking a step back just in time to narrowly avoid the splattering liquid. Just wandering around and ended up in another man's arms. Charles suddenly raised his hand and threw a handful of photos at my face, scattering them all over the ground. Without even looking, I could guess that it was a picture of Miles holding me. Charles had the typical suspicion of someone in a position of power. The last time Miles drove me back to the villa, I suspected he would send someone to investigate. I couldn't help but sneer, since Charles had someone investigate, he should be very clear that Miles has nothing to do with me. Humph, you should be grateful I didn't find anything, otherwise. Otherwise what? I interrupted. Charles, let's break up. Charles seemed completely taken aback by my suggestion to break up. After a moment of silence, he spoke up, stop messing around. Until this moment, Charles still felt that I was just teasing him. I'm tired, Charles. I still can't help but tear up. From the moment you first saw me, you took me as Evelyn's substitute. I thought that over these 3 years, we had feelings for each other. But she came back, and you, knowing that she was making things difficult for me, turned a blind eye. You sheltered her and indulged her. Charles, I don't want to live this kind of life anymore. Charles admitted his bias. If it's about Evelyn, I admit I have favored her a bit. Amelia, Evelyn, and I grew up together, and since childhood, she has never suffered any grievances. She is different from you. He continued to say, without me, as a small actor, how could you have so much money to live a good life? You should know your limits by now. I don't want to have pointless arguments with Charles anymore. He always acts so superior, not at all like himself. Charles took my breakup as a joke, and I responded with vague and perfunctory remarks. I knew that Charles had an important shareholders' meeting in just a few days, and while he was busily occupied, I quietly left his villa. I didn't take anything from the villa except for that seed. Nanjing Airport. I took one last look at this city that I had once been so deeply attached to, then turned and walked into the boarding gate. On the social media platform, I left only a letter to my fans announcing my withdrawal. You don't need to feel sad, summer will pass, and autumn will come. The roar of the airplane sounded, and I forcefully snapped my SIM card in half, disappearing from the public eye from that moment on. Perhaps the medical care abroad is better than that in my country, or maybe the light of Northern California has dispelled the sadness that I cannot share with others. Miles introduced me to a great psychologist, and after some time of adjustment, I gradually broke free from the grip of depression. There is no Charles here, nor that face I once longed for day and night. During my time abroad, Miles was the only person I had contact with back home. The doctor and the house I have here were both arranged for me by him, through others. Miles once studied medicine abroad, and his connections here have helped me a lot. He also often updates me on news from back home. For example, Charles did not get engaged to Evelyn, but was looking for me everywhere. Every time Charles is mentioned, Miles becomes cautious. Amelia, Charles found me. He asked about your whereabouts, but I didn't tell him. I told Miles that he no longer needed to talk to me about Charles. Because I have recovered from my illness and no longer need Charles to heal. Here, I feel very relaxed. I no longer have the anxiety and irritability that made me want to numb myself with cigarettes and alcohol, nor do I suffer to the point of headaches, and I certainly don't cry in nightmares late at night. Before giving birth, Miles took a long vacation to come abroad to see me. I find it too troublesome to come so far, so I won't let Miles come, but he said, I don't think it's far, just the distance of a Pacific Ocean. Miles still came. However, my due date had passed a long time ago, and I still hadn't gone into labor. During the previous checkup, the doctor mentioned that the medication had affected the development of the fetus, and there might be a possibility of a post-term delivery. Miles walked with me on the road, chatting and laughing. We had just returned from the hospital after a prenatal checkup. In this tranquil and peaceful scene, I never expected to encounter Charles. I stood with my belly out, seeing Charles running towards me from a distance across the crosswalk. Amelia, I finally found you. Charles hugged me tightly as if he had lost his mind, and his grip was so strong that it hurt a little. I looked at him calmly and said, "Charles, you're hurting me." "I'm sorry, I'm so excited." My eyes flickered in surprise. I never expected the esteemed Prince of South City would actually learn to apologize. He said, "I've looked into it thoroughly, it was Evelyn who deliberately set you up." "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have misunderstood you. I never thought about getting engaged to her, I only see Evelyn as a sister." "Will you come back? Charles, do you think I look suitable like this?" My tone was as I pushed Charles away and reached out to touch my belly. Charles stepped back and finally saw my loose maternity outfit and baby bump. He looked at me with a hint of surprise. "Mine? Huh, Charles, what dreams are you having in broad daylight? Don't you know when we did it?" I scoffed, saying that you, a person of high status, tend to forget things, like how June 6th of last year was the day Charles brought Evelyn back to the country. After Evelyn returned to the country, Charles and I never had any relations again, and now it's already April, nearly 10 months have passed. It's impossible. Charles's eyes widened, his tone filled with disbelief. "For the past 3 years, you willingly stayed by my side, showering me with kindness and affection. Wasn't it because of love? How could you possibly be carrying someone else's child if you love me so much?" "Ridiculous. Charles, you are mistaken, I have never loved you." I looked at him and smiled, saying, "Is it only allowed for Charles to treat me as a substitute, but not for me to not love Charles? We're all adults here, so don't play games you can't handle." "Amelia, you are lying to me, you are still angry, aren't you?" Charles shook his head, clearly not believing what I said, and pleaded softly, "Please don't be angry, okay? I know I was wrong. Come back to our country with me, let's go back and get married, alright? I want to marry you and make you my young lady of Nanching. Don't you like acting? In the future, you can do whatever you want, okay? I'll introduce you to the big directors and producers in the industry. As long as you come back, I will definitely make you a big star, alright? I can't be without you, Amelia." Charles's eyes turned red with anger as he reached out to grab me, but I shook his hand off. "Charles, have you had enough of this? Stop it, I can tell who is who now. I'll say it again, Charles, Amelia, have never loved you." I reached out and took my bag back from Miles' hand, pulled out my phone, and opened the album to show him. In the phone's photo album, under the camphor tree, sits a young couple. The boy is wearing a white shirt, his smile bright and clean like sunshine. The girl leans on the boy's shoulder, her shoulder-length hair neat and radiant. Charles looked at me in shock, repeatedly glancing at the photos on his phone, and finally asked me in astonishment, "Amelia, do you take me for a substitute?" "Charles, it was just for fun, who isn't a stand-in for someone else?" I scoffed lightly, reclaimed my phone, and said, "Don't take it too seriously, this farce should come to an end. Miles, let's go home." I deliberately called out Miles's name affectionately, familiar enough to wrap my arm around his, smiling brightly as I pulled him away amidst his look of complete astonishment. That's right, Charles is the substitute for my first love. He is the remedy for the unrequited love that has caused me to fall into despair in this life. A few days later, I gave birth to a daughter at 43 weeks plus, naming her Eva. Miles stayed by my side during the delivery until Eva turned 1 month old, just as he was about to return to his country. I actually always knew that after meeting Charles that day, Miles had something he wanted to say, but he held it back. He didn't ask, and I didn't say anything. It wasn't that I didn't want to tell Miles, but those memories were too heavy, and I still didn't know how to bring them up. At the moment of parting, I hugged Miles. "I know you have questions for me, but could you give me a little more time?" Miles stroked my head, smiling gently. "I must have thought too much, you noticed I was unhappy." "I'm fine. When you're ready to talk, can I be your first listener?" I nodded, "Okay." 3 years later, I returned to my country. Miles came to the airport to pick me up, and as soon as Eva saw him, she ran and threw herself into his arms, shouting, "Uncle Miles." I took Miles back to a small fourth-tier county in the rural south. That is where I was born, and it is also where my story begins. I took Eva and Miles to the cemetery. Eva, haven't you always wanted to know who your dad is? This is your dad. I pointed to one of the tombstones and made up a story for my daughter, saying that was her dad. As my gaze shifted, the camera rose steadily, coming to rest on the gravestone, where the features strikingly resembled those of Charles. Miles asked me, "Is this the reason you are looking for Charles?" Yes. I smiled at Miles and generously admitted, because he had suddenly passed away at that time, I had already fallen into a deep depression. Fortunately, I had the luck to meet Miles, who worked wonders and cured my illness. I looked at Miles, my eyes filled with affection. So I asked Miles, "Does what you told me back then still count today?" "Of course. What I have said will always hold true with you." Miles hugged me tightly with excitement, and I hugged you back. That shouldn't count as a doctor-patient dispute, right? Uncle Miles, you're so shy. Eva covered her eyes and peeked through her fingers, playfully sticking out her tongue. Mom, this is great. Eva has two dads now. As I left the cemetery, a gentle breeze swept by, lifting my hair. I turned back and seemed to see Charles smiling and bidding us farewell. That smile is as bright as ever, just like the beautiful past we once shared. I took a deep breath, turned my head, tightened my grip on Miles's hand, faced the sunlight, and walked forward resolutely, never looking back again. The sunlight spills over us, casting long shadows. I know the road ahead is still long, but I am no longer afraid, for I have love in my heart, hope, Eva, and Miles. We will continue to be happy.